Imagine this. A king, powerful, feared, respected, doesn't die in his palace. He doesn't die surrounded by his loyal guards. He doesn't even die with his queen by his side. No, this king takes his last breath in the bed of his mistress. A scandal that would shake an empire. A death so humiliating, it became whispered gossip in taverns, in marketplaces, and in the most private chambers of royal courts across Europe. And yet, it happened. Welcome to Throne of Scandals, where today we uncover the jaw-dropping story of King Henry IV of France, the monarch who died not as a warrior, not as a ruler, but in the most scandalous way possible. But before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, because here we reveal the Betrayal's affairs, and secrets that kings and queens would have killed to keep hidden. France, late 16th century. The throne is unstable. Protestants and Catholics are locked in decades of bloody conflict. The country is exhausted. But, at the center of this chaos rises one man, King Henry IV. He promises peace, stability, and unity, and he delivers. The people call him good, King Henry. But behind the crown, behind the carefully staged portraits, there was another Henry, a man with appetites, a man who believed power meant privilege, and privilege meant women. The French court whispered about him constantly. His bedchamber was never empty, his heart never loyal to one woman. Nobles warned him, advisors begged him, priests lectured him. Your Majesty, you are playing with fire. But Henry laughed it off. He believed no one would dare to challenge him. What they didn't know was that this fire would one day consume him. Henry IV earned himself a nickname, Le Vert Galant, the Green Gallant. It sounded elegant, but everyone knew what it really meant. The king was a womanizer, and unlike other monarchs who hid their mistresses behind palace walls, Henry paraded them like trophies. At one point, he had as many as 6 mistresses at once. Some were married noblewomen, others were young ladies in waiting. Still others were widows who saw him as their golden ticket to influence, and each affair brought drama. One of his ministers famously sighed, Mistress, the king fights his battles by day and his women by night, and it was true. Henry could march an army in the morning, then slip away to a mistress's bed by evening. Now, kings throughout history had mistresses. That wasn't new, but Henry was reckless. He ignored his wife, Queen Margaret, humiliating her in front of the entire court. He gave his lovers gifts of land, titles, even positions of political power. Imagine being the queen, walking into a grand banquet, and seeing your husband holding hands under the table with another woman, while everyone pretends not to notice. The humiliation was unbearable, and his mistresses, they weren't quiet, obedient companions. They fought each other. They gossiped. They schemed. One mistress would spread rumors about another, accusing her of witchcraft, of treason, of poisoning. The palace wasn't just a royal residence, it was a battlefield of jealousy. But one mistress rose above the rest. Gabrielle stunningly beautiful, dangerously ambitious. Gabrielle was not satisfied with being just a lover. She wanted to be queen. And Henry promised her exactly that. He showered her with titles, jewelry, and castles. He told her, "You are not just my mistress, you are my destiny." He even announced plans to annul his marriage to Margaret and marry Gabrielle instead. The court was horrified. Nobles whispered, "The king has lost his mind." The Catholic Church threatened him. His advisors begged him to stop. But Henry was obsessed. And then, scandal. Gabrielle became pregnant. The king was thrilled, declaring that she would soon be his queen. But just days before Easter in 1599, she suddenly collapsed. Pregnant, bleeding, screaming in agony. By morning, she was dead. Henry was devastated, but the court was not surprised. Some said it was a stroke. Others whispered poison. Many believed powerful nobles had quietly arranged her death, determined to stop the king from marrying a mistress. But here's the thing. Gabrielle haunted Henry. Every mistress after her lived in her shadow. Henry would call them my Gabrielles. None could replace her. And yet, he didn't stop. More mistresses came. More scandals followed. And with every affair, Henry's enemies sharpened their knives. To the church, he was a king living in sin. To nobles, he was a ruler blinded by lust. To his enemies abroad, he was a laughingstock. But Henry didn't care. He believed his charm could protect him. He would spend hours in a council meeting, then slip out the back door to spend the night with a mistress. He was king of France, untouchable. Until he wasn't. By 1610, Henry was in his late 50s. Age had slowed his body, but not his appetites. He still visited mistresses in secret, often disguising himself to avoid the eyes of the court. But the people were talking, and his enemies were plotting. One evening, Henry went to see a lover. He was not in his palace, not in his queen's chambers. He was in the bed of his mistress. And there, in the dead of night, he died. Imagine the scene. The king's lifeless body discovered tangled in sheets that were not his queen's. Servants rushing in, panicked whispers spreading through the corridors. By morning, the entire court knew. The king had died in his mistress's bed. It was the ultimate humiliation. The church condemned him as a sinner who had been punished by God. His enemies laughed. saying he had lived like a fool and died like one. Even his own people were divided. Some mourned him as the king who brought peace. Others mocked him as the king who let lust destroy his dignity. But was it really that simple? Some say Henry died of natural causes, a heart attack brought on by age and stress. Others suggest poison. After all, he had enemies everywhere. Religious fanatics who wanted him gone. Nobles who hated his favoritism. Even members of his own family who stood to benefit from his death. And here's where it gets truly suspicious. Henry's death was not announced immediately. Hours passed before the news broke, and when it did, the official story was carefully rewritten. Instead of admitting the king died in his mistress's bed, the palace claimed he passed away in a more dignified setting. They tried to rewrite history on the spot, but it was too late. The scandal had already spread. In taverns, people whispered that the king had died naked, in the arms of a lover half his age. In markets, mothers warned their daughters, "Don't trust men who live like Henry." Across Europe, rival courts snickered. The mighty king of France had been reduced to a punchline. And what of his queen, Marie de Medici? She finally had her revenge. With Henry gone, she stepped into power as regent for their son, Louis XIII. Her first act, banish the mistresses. Sweep the court clean of Henry's scandals. Erase his lovers from history. But no matter how hard she tried, she could not erase the gossip. Henry IV's legacy is forever split. To some, he was a hero who brought peace to France. To others, he was a sinner whose lust humiliated the crown. And maybe that's the real scandal, that a man who united a kingdom could not control his own desires. That the king who gave France stability could not keep his own house in order. And that in the end, no matter how powerful you are, history always remembers how you lived, and how you died. So, what do you think? Was Henry IV just unlucky, dying in the wrong bed at the wrong time? Or was it poetic justice? A king punished by his own vices? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this scandalous story, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because here, on Throne of Scandals, we dig up the wildest secrets that kings and queens hoped would stay buried. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.